All right. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the CV Update. As usual, we had another week packed with sports news, including the Bruins up 3-1 against the Washington Capitals in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Celtics beginning their playoff series last night against the Brooklyn Nets. The Red Sox continuing their strong play to remain in first place, or actually now be tied likely in first place after today's loss. And this is despite strong stretches by the New York Yankees and Tampa Bay Rays, and the Patriots involved in some transactions and some possible trade rumors. We will discuss all of that today. And joining me as usual and back again after 2 weeks off is Rohan Venkatesh, my co-host. Rohan, welcome back. And how have you been overall?
How is it not great to be here as always, man? It seems like a lot has happened in the 2 weeks that I was out. I never expected the Bruins to be carrying a 3-1 lead over the Caps in the first round. And here we are. I don't want to jinx it, but let's do this and get this done tonight.
Yeah, we'll talk about that first, but I also want to introduce our two new graduates who are now returning to the show, Anirban Chakraborty and Ravi Bajpai. Guys, first of all, congratulations on graduating and welcome back to the CV Update. How are you guys doing?
Doing well as always, very excited to graduate and always a pleasure to be on this podcast. So excited to talk some sports, Boston sports.
Yeah, say more of the same to Ravi. It's always great to be here, and especially on it definitely feels good to have that under our belts. So really excited to graduate.
And the 2 weeks I was out, and I come back, and there are 2 more degrees, so can't complain about that. Congratulations, everyone! Congratulations, Ravi. Good as always.
Thanks, Rohan. Really appreciate it.
All right. Well, anyways, let's just quickly discuss the Bruins first. Up 3-1. Rohan, what's your takeaway on the series? I'll just start first. Actually, yeah, go on.
Whoa! What happened? What is that? And I mean that in a totally good way, right? Because they seem to be struggling in game 1, right? They go down early and then they're able to immediately tie, and they go down again, and somehow they tie late, and then pretty early on in overtime, Rask, in my opinion, kind of gives up a soft one. It looked like it went pretty much through the 5-hole, and it wasn't like an extremely difficult shot, but I feel like probably a really good goalie might have been able to save that. And even though I've said great things about Rask in the past, that was not one of his finer moments. But credit to the Bruins D, and I mean, Rask did make several other great saves along the way in games 2, 3, and 4, and I'd say the biggest reason that the Bruins are in this series is and they're up 3-1, not just because they were able to kind of break out and get 4 goals in the previous game. The previous games, which were very tight, they were tight checking, they were highly defensive, and you got to give it to the Bruins D for shutting down that top Capitals line of Ovechkin and Backstrom. So once he kind of, I mean, granted, Ovechkin did get on the score sheet once against the Bruins, but to be able to keep Ovi at just 1 goal 4 games in, I'd say is a feat in and of itself. And then just let your offense carry on from there. Marchand's been great on offense, and Taylor Hall has come up big as well in some key moments. And that's not to say so much about the other players and the other lines that are getting involved. But given all of that, I said this during the regular season, and I'll say that right now. The Caps are a very, very good team, and they're going to be really mad, and they're going to come at it with everything tonight. And given all of that, the Bruins gotta close it out. They gotta finish it out. I just don't want a repeat of 2010. so given the fact that the Bruins are one win away from closing this one out, just go out there and get it done. And that's pretty much what I have to say about the Bruins right now. And I would say that right now you could say the momentum is on their side, and of course they did benefit from the fact that the Capitals had 3 different goalies in the first 3 games, and in game 3, Ilya Samsonov made a really, really kind of rookie mistake.
Oh yeah, and he drew the ire of Alex Ovechkin afterward too.
Yeah. He kind of just went behind the net, and there was like an easy wraparound after that. So it when I watched that, it was great, but it seemed kind of an anticlimactic way to end that game. So
a double overtime, right? The first 3 games went into overtime, which is crazy.
Yeah, so there's so many, like, even though it may seem lopsided 3-1 Bruins right now, it's actually felt a lot closer than that. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the Caps come back at it with everything. So it's gonna be a good remaining, hopefully one more game, but a max of 3 more games if it comes to that.
Game 5 is tonight, and I'll just add a quick thing. I've been happy overall. Like, obviously, you play in 3 overtime games, and you're able to win 2 of them. Overtime, we know it's just a bounce, right? It's a little bit of luck is involved. So the fact that 2 straight games, the Bruins were able to win in overtime after the Caps won the first one, and then they had a dominant Game 4 performance. So I've been very happy with the performance. I don't know if it'll end tonight. I did say in the last week, Bruins in 7. I hope it's Bruins in 5, but I don't know. I think Capitals probably win tonight, but let's see.
I'm going with Bruins in 6. That's kind of what I'm going with that. I don't think they're going to get it done tonight, but I think they're going to get it done on Tuesday.
But yep, that's our Bruins take as promised. And no, the Bruins have been playing well, up 3-1. But unfortunately, let's talk about the other team in the playoffs right now, the Celtics, who lost to the Brooklyn Nets last night, 104-93, game 1.
Not surprised about that.
They were leading in the first half, but then obviously Brooklyn picked it up. You have KD, Kyrie Irving, James Harden all picking it up, and the Celtics kind of often sort of struggled. It was a little disappointing because the Nets defense is not very good. Robert Williams, what a game he had, though. 9 blocks. But Ravi, what was your take on this game last night for the Celtics?
Yeah, again, similar to Rohan, wasn't really surprised that much about the outcome. The Celtics did a phenomenal job at the start. Defending Brooklyn and making the shots they needed to. But, again, the sheer firepower of just having 3 amazing scorers in Harden, Kyrie, and Kevin Durant, it's very hard to beat that. Also, we'll definitely commend Robin Williams' incredible game. A triple-double he was very close to a triple-double with no assists. It's just ridiculous. The other thing that I will note is that just looking forward in the series is that Brooklyn – in this game that Brooklyn still won by a comfortable margin in the end. They shot 23% from 3, which I definitely think you can expect for the rest of the series. And I think that bodes pretty badly for the Celtics. So I think this, there definitely was some highlights. I think Williams will be a starter next. I'm optimistic to see him as a starter going forward. But yeah, I think the Nets just seem to be too much based on this game.
Yeah, Anirban, what are your thoughts from last night?
Yeah, it's definitely hard not to see it as a missed opportunity given the low scoring percentage that we saw, and also the fact that despite having actually 14 offensive rebounds for the Nets, that they couldn't really muster any significant number of second chance points, and you can definitely expect that to increase too. But what I will say though is, to be fair, we did have a lower scoring performance from Jason Tatum, for example, to be specific. And part of that was, of course, due to some really strong one-on-one defending when Kevin Durant was on him. And, of course, I think that's something Brad Stevens will have to work on in designing plays that give Tatum the space to kind of move around and basically go one-on-one against other players like Kyrie or Bruce Bowen, who he does have a height advantage over, right? No matter how good you are, it's just hard to shoot over Kevin Durant. He has a huge wingspan. But going back to Rob Williams, I also want to highlight that he actually had 5 offensive rebounds for us in the 9 that he had. In a day when we really struggled to get offensive rebounds, it's really hard to overstate the value there. And also in terms of the offense, right, we know that aside from being a threat at really right at the post, right in the paint under the basket, he also really showed some promising signs to be able to really, as a person, really divert the Nets' attention away from other players or away from other plays. And I think that gave a lot of players more room to play in. And so I think there are some positives for us going forward. If we can, just like we can expect the Nets to score better, I think we can also expect Jason Tatum and Kemba Walker to do better than when their basically second half performance that saw the Nets go on a really huge scoring run that essentially put the game to bed.
Yeah, Tatum had only 22 points, 6 of 20 shooting, and Kemba was 5 of 16 with 15 points. Both of them were very bad this game.
6 of 20, you're not going to go anywhere when your star guy is going 6 for 20 on the field.
I would want to say this. It was 82-79 in the fourth quarter. They were down by 3 late, but the Nets closed the game on a 22-14 run. That's why it was 11 points. But the Celtics were down by just 3. And it was really that third quarter, which was the Nets outscored them 31-20. The Celtics were actually up 6 at halftime. So they were playing well, but I think it's just they lost the edge of the momentum. Obviously, Brooklyn was making the shots. Ravi, I agree with you. Brooklyn is probably not going to be shooting 23% from 3 again. But let's see what happens. I was hoping the Celtics could steal a game. And I still think they can. Like, that's why my series prediction was Nets in 5. That's my official prediction. I mean, I thought that this game 1, and I think it kind of played out the way I expected initially. Like, I expected the Celtics to kind of come out blazing and the Nets to sort of start off a little slow. And that would sort of be like the way the Celtics can steal a game. Unfortunately, the Celtics only were able to do that for 2 quarters. So, I mean, I guess I'm not surprised. But the Nets are the better team. Obviously, they're a contender. They're not just a contender, they're the favorites to win the whole thing this season. So I'm not surprised that the Nets were able to win this game. But obviously it's a little disappointing the way this whole season has gotten, and obviously the way that Brooklyn kind of helped.
They're capable of winning. I mean, they did have to play that play-in game against the Wizards.
Washington's a bad team. So
but hey, at least they took care of business on that, which for the Celtics is not always a given.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we got to commend Jason Tatum for those 50 points. I mean, he was good that game. And I don't know, Wizards, obviously, like if it's 118-100, that was a great game to watch. I mean, though it was kind of like the halftime, it was kind of close. And then the third quarter, the Celtics kind of just went on a run. Tatum was awesome. But that's the thing, like the Celtics just have one guy at this point. And I just really hope at the end of the series, people don't go and just say, oh, see, Jaylen Brown was out. That's why this team isn't going to be winning the series. It's far beyond Jaylen Brown, right? Like, I mean, we saw all season when Kemba, Jaylen, and Tatum were all on the floor, this team still was inconsistent and lost games. So Jaylen Brown, I mean, yeah, he'd help, but he's not just the solution. You got to make more changes this offseason to really address what's happening now. Like, this is a juggernaut in Brooklyn that's going to be around for a couple more seasons at least. I mean, Ravi, don't you agree with that?
Yeah, I would definitely say the Celtics should be optimistic for the offseason. I think this year was just bad for a number of reasons. You know, Jason Tatum getting COVID, a number of injuries, et cetera, et cetera. Kemba Walker's injury, especially. But yeah, I think they should be looking good into the off season, or at least not optimistic.
To really kind of go about the injury, right? And like I agree, like there were injury prone, but Brooklyn, those 3, Harden, Durant, and Kyrie, they only played 8 games together in the regular season. So they were also battered by injury too, but Brooklyn was still able to figure it out, right? So like, what do you think kind of like separates Brooklyn from Boston? Like what happened? Like, because Boston, I agree, both teams were injury hampered, but one team actually kind of took it as a challenge and actually really embraced the adversity. The other one sort of folded.
Brooklyn just has more depth, though. They have way more depth than the Celtics do. And of course, the Celtics are also a very underachieving team this year. We have all the right elements in place. I mean, but Tatum's not playing up to his potential. Kemba's not playing up to his potential. And like when you don't have your so-called star players delivering what you got them there to do, you can't really expect them to perform at to be able to compete against Brooklyn. Yes, in theory, on paper, the Celtics should be able to compete against Brooklyn, but the way that they're kind of jiving right now, I don't see the chemistry right now for them to really be able to give Brooklyn a run for their money. I think it's going to be over in 5. I second your opinion on that. I think Celtics, if they're lucky, they might pull off a victory in Game 3, maybe in overtime, something like that, and then they're just going to go straight back down and lose Game 4 or Game 5.
It'll be like that's gonna be one game they win, like Tatum's probably gonna have to score like 60 again or something in order for them to have a chance, right?
I mean, I don't really see how it goes down any other way. Maybe a sweep. That's like the only other thing I can.
Yeah, I kind of feel that's sort of what I'm starting to fear, a sweep. But anyways, yeah, I mean, it's been disappointing. Like obviously, I'm not surprised about Game 1. Obviously, I was hoping though for a little bit of a better performance in Game 1, and I guess they gave it for a half. So maybe that's all they're capable of doing against Brooklyn. But anyways, that's our take on the Celtics. Obviously, an underachieving team, likely reaching the end of the season in probably next week. Anyways, that's our take on the Celtics. Let's talk about the Red Sox now, a team that has overachieved big time this season. Let's talk. I mean, obviously today a 6-2 loss against the Phillies, but you know what? You got they took the series against the Phillies, and they
and they rested Bogarts today as well. They arrested some key players. And
this is a resilient team. I love the way this team has played this season. Like, I mean, remember against Toronto on Thursday?
Oh yeah, JD Martinez. I mean, because it looked like they'd blown the lead, and then JD Martinez comes right back and slapped a 2-run.
It's the exact opposite of the Celtics. It's the exact opposite. What do you expect from the Celtics? Like, you lose a lead, you don't just like start like crying about it. You actually go back and get the lead back. Like, that's what I love about this team. They're resilient. I don't know how far this team is going, but this has been such a fun ride to watch. Ravi, I know as a baseball fanatic, you came on at the start of the season, and we were all pessimistic, but how much of a pleasant surprise have the Red Sox been this season, and have your expectations for them changed since then?
No, I would say this Red Sox season, I'm also super excited about this team in general. Like they, I think previously when I was on, the thing that I raised the most, the thing that I was most skeptical about them is their pitching. Their pitching was horrible last year. Like one of the worst in the league. But this year they are second in FIP, which measures, their underlying stats is amazing for their pitching and very cost effective. So I think they're doing a great job, and their offense has done a similarly good job. They're a little reliant on home runs, but I think that's just generally how the game's going. They've been very reliant on the long ball. One thing in terms of outlook for the rest of the season, I will think, you can't expect the Yankees and the Rays to just Yankees, Yays, and even Toronto's in the mix to slow down. I think one of them might have a shot at overtaking the Red Sox, but I'm still very optimistic that we can at minimum get a wild card and be in the playoffs. The thing to watch for on my end would be our offense has been very reliant on our top level scoring. So JD Martinez,
Devers,
Bogarts, Devers, and even Verdugo. Meanwhile, the rest of it hasn't really contributed as much. And as I mentioned,
Franchy Cordero got his first home run today.
Yeah, exactly. So I would like to see more contributions from the lower end of the lineup if we're gonna keep in the playoff mix and maybe take the AL East.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree with you. It's been a pleasant surprise. I still am a little skeptical on the bullpen and the pitching a little bit. Like, obviously, Garrett Richards is looking like 2014, 2015 Garrett Richards, which is credit to Kai and Bloom, because we were ripping him early because he looked horrible. But now he looks really, really good. Martin Perez is okay. He's like a number 4. Eduardo Rodriguez, I am a little concerned about him today. He had a very bad first inning.
2 bad starts in a row, one against Toronto and then like again.
Oh, to be fair to him today, he allowed 4 runs in 1 inning, but then the others.
But he got his
after
yeah.
that. Oh, it was like a bad inning that kind of really hurt him. Yeah, Ravi, what do you think about that?
In my opinion, Erod's always been a bit of a ce bomb. Like, he's very good. He's very, very good initially in the first couple of innings, but later on, he's just once you get to the 4th, 5th, 6th inning, just tends to blow games sometimes. But the strikeout upside's there, and I think I'm still optimistic about him, but still I admit that's a pretty huge concern.
And the rotation is definitely decent because Erod's been struggling a little bit. I mean, you said Garrett Richards, he's been picking it up, and Ottavino, he may not always be the most consistent, but you can expect to get at least a few good innings out of him. And then while the bullpen may be on and off, Matt Barnes, awesome. Matt Barnes has pretty much been lights out. Of course, he did blow a save against the Angels. You congratulated Ohtani in the process. He's probably I have, on a side note, I actually don't think that the comparisons to between Shohei Ohtani and Babe Ruth are really that far-fetched, but time will tell whether that ends up being it. But will
Ohtani be traded to some team and then the Angels won't win for 86 years? That's the real way.
Imagine if that team ends up being the Red Sox. Then ironically the Red Sox become the new Yankees.
Yeah, but anyways, Anirban, what are your thoughts on this Red Sox team? Definitely overachievers, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, just echoing what everyone said, I've really enjoyed watching them so far, and I especially think against a team like the Phillies who have themselves being very disappointed with how their season's going. I think it was really important to kind of pull out a win here, or a win over the series, even if we did lose today. Because remember, the Yankees have won 5 in a row, and last time I checked, they were leading against the White Sox. I don't remember. I'll check what the final score was, but the White Sox themselves are leading the AL Central, and the Yankees have already won the series against them. Meanwhile, the Rays have
Yankees did win today, 5-4.
Yeah, okay, so they swept the Chicago White Sox, who are leaders in the AL Central. Rays have a 10-game winning streak, though of course that includes 3 games against the Orioles. But the point being, these are the series that the Red Sox really have to kind of continue winning, because we're in a very competitive division this year, and it's really important that as the Rays and the Yankees keep the pressure on, that we're also rising to that. I was also really happy with the performance by Darwin's and Hernandez yesterday. I thought he really stepped up as a reliever when in a moment when our bullpen has been a source of some stress for us as fans. That's one of the main things, including for example, when Bryce Harper was up with the bases loaded and just got struck out on 3 pitches, right? That's what you want your relievers to do. And obviously Bryce Harper has been struggling not only in this game, but also in this season, but it was really promising. I mean, that's what you want your bullpen to do. You want to have faith that they can pull out these kinds of plays with bases loaded and really, at the end of the day, come away with a really tight win after, basically giving Matt Barnes something to really work with in the late innings.
Yep, definitely agree. It's been a good season so far, and obviously today was a little bit of a disappointment. Frenchie Cordero and Rafael Devers both hit home runs though,
But weirdly enough, today's loss, it didn't really feel like today's loss really hurt that much, even though they did lose. It didn't.
Well, it does kind of hurt because now you're tied with Tampa for a first. You're no longer having a lead, and the Yankees are now half game.
But still, they won like 3 straight series, and that's more than you can ask for most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, it'll get tougher. I think they play Atlanta next, and Atlanta is a pretty good baseball team. They're like, I think, leading that division right now. So it's going to be tougher. I mean, they have to basically keep this going.
And yeah, the NL East is like a pretty close division, but it's also been like the worst division because like the Mets, Phillies, they're all kind of like scrunched up near in and around first place. But they're all like 500-ish teams, and like teams that are barely over 500 are in first place, and the league keeps changing every day. Meanwhile, you have something completely different in the NL West, where you have the lead pretty much changing almost every day among the Padres, the Dodgers, and the Giants, except those 3 teams are all really, really good. So it's been a crazy league, and you got a lot of teams, a lot of contenders, and I think that's good for the game overall.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the Giants have been a pretty big surprise too, because they weren't expected. That division was just supposed to be between the Dodgers and the Padres. So the fact that you have the Giants entering the mix, leading that division right now, it's definitely that's a surprise as well. In addition to the Red Sox.
It's going to be the ultimate battle of California.
Yep, pretty much.
Actually, yeah. Come to think about it, all the California teams, well, maybe except for the Angels, have been doing well, right? You get the Dodgers, the Padres, the Giants, and the A's. The A's are doing pretty well as well. This year as well. They're leading the AL West, and I would have to say I didn't see that coming. So yeah, there's a lot of great teams this year. And
tell me, after all these years, you haven't you're surprised by Billy Beane and his Moneyball strategy?
Well, I mean, you can't really say that strategy is going to work you're not really. I mean, I don't know if that strategy is in place to this day, and if your guy's doing it, it's only a matter of time before the other guys pick up on it. And the Astros pretty much perfected it in 2017. Granted that World Series.
Oh, they also perfected banging out.
Yeah. So even though that World Series was tainted, I mean, like in the modern era, they probably almost got the use of analytics down to as precisely as you could get it to go. And I don't see the trend decelerating anytime soon. I think more and more teams are going to start to do this, and it's just going to elevate the quality of the game overall. Of course, I know the analytics in baseball can elicit polarizing opinions, but my opinion is that it's going to make everybody better, and because it's going to give some teams a temporary advantage, like it did for the A's back then, and then other teams are going to catch on, and then that's how things level out, and then it's just going to elevate the game as a whole. But that's the way I see baseball moving forward in the next like 10 years or so. And I think it's my opinion here. I think it's for the better. Other things got to be fixed as well. There are so many other issues with baseball. It used to play long seasons. Whatever. No, I mean, I've gone over that previous episode, but anyway. But
based on the analytics discussion, no, I agree. Ravi, Anirban, I just want to get your take on what like this direction of analytics in baseball. Do you like it, or do you kind of wish it? Do you feel it's just too much?
I personally like it quite a lot. I think part of the fun in baseball is like, beyond just knowing the rules and stuff, I really enjoy just like learning about the game and a deeper understanding of it. And I think analytics is an important part of that, understanding why certain players are undervalued, why teams, think one guy shows more potential than the other. That's a huge thing. And also understanding how one player might be underperforming but might be a great buy. Like I find that very interesting. I find it interesting to learn how the offices understand how players are undervalued or overvalued, and I think it adds a lot to the game. Though that's just me, and not everyone's as into analytics.
Well, I would agree with Ravi, but I mean I like analytics because it adds a mental component to the game. And I think I would think that the people who don't like analytics probably also don't like it for that same reason. They probably don't want to think. They just like to watch the game and see how it unfolds. But they don't want to think about, should I shift the field? Should I do an infield shift on this hitter? Should I shift the field to the left on this hitter? Should I shift to the right on that hitter? Should I train this guy to hit it at a certain launch angle? Or should I be tracking the exit velocity on every single swing? I mean, those are things that some of the data nerds can think about, but it's probably not what the average fan is thinking about.
That's fair. I mean, I think it's also like a lot of things like good in moderation, and I think it adds a helpful dynamic that you want to see your teams using. Though I think it's also nice to like have your team leaders have the power to kind of use it, but then also continue using their own judgment. Like I remember in Terry Francona's book, actually, he used to talk about using kind of analytics to optimize batting lineups against certain types of pitchers. And one time, like I guess the model had said that he should actually replace Mike Lowell, who was the third baseman back then, because like he would be expected to struggle against, I guess, an opposite-sided pitcher. But then what Terry Francona was saying was, this model couldn't quantify the fact that he knew Mike Lowell and that if he were to actually bench him for this game, he might actually lose a lot of confidence that might actually affect his form. So, things like that where a model can predict statistics up to a certain extent, but even kind of what goes on in your head, like the man management, the interplayer
that's a great point.
coach relations. I think that's something that is going to be that I don't even really want to see replaced by
it's like last year, right? When Blake Snell was like pulled by the Tampa Bay Rays, right?
I mean that's evidence. I mean that's evidence that there were holes in the model. It doesn't that's not evidence to say that you shouldn't be using models at all.
Right. Yeah.
That's also evidence to say you shouldn't just be using models either, right? I mean, if the models aren't perfect yet and they're still a work in progress, you should be using that in addition to your brain as well.
I
mean, models aren't perfect. Human judgment isn't perfect either. But if models on average give you better results than human judgment does,
that, though?
It makes sense in aggregate to go with models.
How do you know that models are?
It's been tested. It's been tested and back tested, and they've run through simulations.
Back tested where though? Back-to-back World Series, the losing team was burned by analytics. I would call that failing the test in two critical spots, right?
Yeah, but it's all about aggregation, right? Because those aren't the only two World Series that have ever been played. You can go back and look at and data from several years ago compared to now, and once you put all that information together, you're going to get some kind of idea as to how things are going to play out in certain scenarios. Obviously, that's not going to end up happening every single time because you have uncertainty and so many other factors to consider, and no event is guaranteed. By definition, events are random. That's what makes sports what it is. That's what makes it fun to watch. But when certain events are more likely, we're going to skew it to make the positive events for our team to be more likely. That doesn't mean that it's going to happen, though. And so it's easy to look at times when the models fail and say, "Oh yeah, models are this model is bad." Or, yeah, but at the same time, I don't think you can for every time you can point to an example where human judgment would have done better than the model, like the Blake Snell example. I mean, I could probably say that there's examples where human judgment would have done worse than data. So it's all a game of which gets you more wins in the long run.
Well, let me just ask you this, right? Like in 2001, this is going to football, but it's the same idea of analytics. In 2001, when Bill Belichick was juggling between starting Drew Bledsoe, the quarterback at the time, and sixth-round pick Tom Brady, I mean, which model would have told him to go with Tom Brady over Drew Bledsoe, who had started a Super Bowl and was the face of the franchise at that point?
I don't know, because at the time Tom Brady hadn't really played in the NFL much. You didn't really know anything about him, so you couldn't really say that, okay, this is how Tom Brady is going to play. But what you probably would have been able to say at the time was, hey, like, this is how he played in college. Who knows how he's going to adjust to an NFL environment? And because we have a very small sample size of how many games he's played, there's a huge variability in what we can expect out of Tom Brady. And there's also the high end of that spectrum where in some scenarios, Tom Brady ends up being this star athlete. And lo and behold, that's what happened.
I personally don't think a model will ever be able to accurately measure player development. You really can't predict how one player could change his approach and completely rise to superstar or completely fall off the board like Carson Wentz with the Philadelphia Eagles. No model would have told you that this year you just want
with football. It's harder though. I will give you that.
Football is hard. My personal take on models is that they work in a large just over the course of many games they will win. But when you're in the World Series, when you're in like a 7-game series or Game 7, I would go with the gut decision that gives confidence in your players, because in the end that will matter much more. And models in my mind only work in a large scale, so very helpful in the regular season, but not as helpful not as helpful in a singular game. So famously the Warriors and the Rockets, when the Rockets kept shooting, they missed 29 threes in a row.
Yeah, 27.
And
you're talking about 2018, right? Game 7.
Yeah, exactly. Like they just kept shooting the three because that's what worked for them in the regular season. That these were good looks. That would have worked. But in my mind, they should have gone with player confidence. These shots weren't working and changed their approach. And that's something the model wouldn't have told you.
Oh, exactly. So that's the thing. Like models, they're not imperfect at the end of the day. And I like models, like I like analytics, but I don't like just sort of, hey, let's just replace the thinking with these models and let these models do the thinking. I think the value in models is being a supplement to the coach or the player to like make approaches. Because yeah, obviously you can't really forecast like 20 years from now or like even 10 years from now that this guy's just going to like develop like Giannis, right? When Giannis came into the league, he was like this really like different player. But I mean, which model would have told you that Giannis is just going to like bulk up? He's going to change the way he eats, or like Joel Embiid, right? Like injuries the first 2 years. What model told you that these guys would change their conditioning like that? Like models can't really forecast that. Models are meant to sort of just kind of be there for like, oh, this guy's playing well against these types of guys. That's how like you have to go. So it's not going to be able to forecast that stuff. Like maybe I mean even the most advanced, sophisticated models.
Eventually, we're getting closer to that though, because the models are becoming more and more sophisticated day by day.
Possibly. I mean, still, but there's limits to what these models are capable of doing. Being in that space, I've seen that even like those types of models you're discussing, they're very hard to work with. Even with a ton of data over years and years and years worth of data, like decades worth of data, it can still be hard, right? Because decades, players change their approaches, right? Like the NBA now versus the NBA 20 years ago, it's not the same league. Same with baseball, right? Nowadays, baseball strikeouts are king. Strikeouts are just
strikeouts and home runs. The number of balls in play is pretty much plummeted.
And we've already seen 6 no-hitters already. You know the record for most no-hitters in a season is 7. In a baseball season, the record is 7.
No, we're not even we're barely 6. 2 months in. We're not even 2 months into the season.
It's so like that's the thing. Like you never know how the approach is going to change going forward too. You can't forecast like 10 years from now what's going to happen. Football, higher offenses because now there's more rules to protect the quarterback. So there's all sorts of stuff rules that will be factored in that we can't really forecast right now. Like another thing is like we talk about stats and stuff like that. Like would anyone have forecasted 10 years ago the NFL would have 17 regular season games instead of 16 now? Like would that have been things? So like that's the thing. Like the models are good, but
if the model incorporates fatigue, maybe you could. I don't know. I'm sure there's a way to model that as well.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's a way to model everything, but then the question is, how good is that model?
That's another story.
You can have a model with like 100 different factors, but how good is that model going to be in ending up predicting this stuff? And you also have to see the thing with models is there has to be some sort of consistency and trend that's able to find. Models don't just sort of like arbitrary. If you give like 5 different statistical, or I don't know, if you give like 5 statistical lines and they lead to 5 different outcomes, even though they're the exact same, the model's going to be thrown off because the model needs to see some consistency and trend. That's how these models work. They basically feed off consistency and trend. They learn patterns, but if there's no pattern to learn, then you're not going to have a model that really works well. That's like the thing with models. I like analytics. I like how it's been introduced into these sports. I just hope that they don't abuse it and put too much into it. That's really my sort of concern with analytics going forward. And I feel all of us kind of agree with that. We don't want to, I mean, maybe, I don't think it's just replace managers. Otherwise, what's the point of having
abuse is in the eye of the beholder, right? Because you could say that the Rays, quote unquote, abused analytics, but it was to their own detriment when they took Blake Snell out of the game.
Yeah, exactly. But anyways, yeah, that's our take on analytics and baseball. And okay, but it's a very interesting discussion, guys. I know I enjoyed having this, but let's just quickly now move on to the Patriots. Obviously, we talked about them a little bit, but there's not really that much news. But let's just start with the re-signing of Brian Hoyer. Now they have 4 quarterbacks on the roster. I don't know what the plan is. Like, do you guys have any insight, Ravi and Anirban, on what re-signing Brian Hoyer does? Like, is he a coach essentially?
I mean, I think the first thing I note is that like, in terms of like the news, like Brian Hoyer knows the Patriots offense, or at least was considered to know it just about as well as Tom Brady. And in fact, if I remember correctly, Tom Brady wasn't too happy when Brian Hoyer actually left. I know you and I used to talk about this a lot. What I'd say though, I mean, of course, like I don't really think there's much of a debate about, like would Brian Hoyer be starting for us or whatever. Like that's not going to happen. I mean,
Kansas City week 4, well, don't we?
Sure. Like, I mean, like, you know, it's more about what is his role going to be in the team. And I could definitely see him being like, I know I was actually reading an article today by in the Pats pulpit, in which it was kind of discussing a possible role as like a mentor for like Mac Jones entering kind of the season. And not only that, but also having kind of a lay of the land of the offense, being like a trusted, respected voice in the locker room, all these kinds of things that, doesn't necessarily require you to be like the first starter undisputed quarterback. I think another thing that this conveys, this was actually something that Ben Volen recently said in the Boston Globe, was that this essentially most likely means that Jarrett Stidham's career at the Patriots is almost effectively not really going to take off, because if you think about the roles we have here, Cam Newton is going to maybe be the starter, or at least the person you trust in cases where Mac Jones might not be starting. Mac Jones is a cute quarterback of the future. If Brian Hoyer is going to be the person to be looking after Mac Jones, or otherwise just kind of being familiar with routines, then that doesn't leave a lot of room for Jarrett Stidham to be lying around. So that's also another thing to keep in mind as the implications. But yeah, I don't think there's much to read into in terms of like starting quarterbacks. It's more like, what's this person's role going to be as a mentor or as a leader in the Patriots?
Yeah, Ravi, what's your take on Hoyer?
I would say similar to Anirban. Like he understands the Patriots offense better than almost everyone aside from Tom Brady back in the days before he left. And I think he's a great potential mentor as we lead into more of the Mac Jones era of the Patriots.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I guess there's just one other thing. I agree with that. I think he's just meant to be a mentor. He's a good coach. Like, I mean, I remember reading in Super Bowl 53, he gave the Patriots a lot of intel on how the Rams ran their offense, because he when he was with Houston, I believe, or with some team, he had played under Kyle Shanahan, and Shanahan and Sean McVay, who was the Rams coach, they were like McVay was essentially under Shanahan. So basically Hoyer, from like studying like NFL films, he saw that the Rams ran the same offense as what Shanahan was running. So he actually basically helped the Patriots defense prepare in the Super Bowl for Jared Goff. And I mean, the results speak for themselves, right? 3 points allowed in the Super Bowl that year against the Rams. So I think he's a good mind. Like, I think he's a smart guy. Obviously not like a great quarterback, but I think he's a smart guy, respecting the locker room. And I think that's why he's there. And just one other thing I wanted to bring up. Basically, Michael Holley of NBC Sports Boston reports that Julio Jones, a wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons, he is interested in playing with Cam Newton. So I just wanted to ask you guys, would you trade for him if you're the Patriots? Would you trade for Julio Jones?
Absolutely.
I would say I was initially, if you asked me a couple months ago, I would say probably not, because I still was unsure about the Patriots, the direction we were going in. But obviously we've gone all in with our extra cap space, and I would say at this point, why not? We have the capabilities to trade for him. We do have, I believe, we still have some cap space, and we can make room in terms of cap space if we decide to trade people like Stephon Gilmore.
I mean, I don't think don't worry about the cap space, because there's always ways to manipulate that. You can like defer the payments to multiple years. The cap space isn't as big of an issue, I don't think.
The fundamental thing is that we went all in free agency. Getting Julio Jones would just be doubling down on that. And at this point, I would say, why not? You know, that's the direction this team has chosen. And if we're gonna go one way, we may as well go all in.
Rohan, what's your take? Yay or nay on Julio Jones?
If his reason for wanting to come to New England is wanting to play with Cam Newton, I have mixed feelings on it, because I don't even know how many games Cam Newton is going to play. I think that the first sign of trouble, Bill Belichick's going to cut him loose and say, Mac Jones, you're the QB now. So
I mean, I think Julio would be, I mean, that's what the report is, but I think Julio sort of, I mean, I think he'd welcome, I don't know. Actually, that's a good point. Like, if it's Cam, then if Cam is benched, then I don't know, but maybe Cam really benefits from having Julio, and as a result.
But hey, as Ravi said, if we got the cap space, and as you mentioned, the cap space isn't an issue, why not?
I mean, I would say absolutely. I mean, also like the trade would let you get part ways with N'Keal Harry, right?
Because it really depends on what the Patriots would have to give up. If it doesn't really
N'Keal Harry
to give up
anything. A second round pick, right? N'Keal Harry and
probably something like that. And I don't think that's really much of a loss.
N'Keal Harry's been.
No disrespect to N'Keal Harry, but I don't think that's a huge price to pay.
Of course not. Yeah, I mean, you guys would do N'Keal Harry and a second round pick for Julio Jones, right? I'd probably drive them to the airport and go in Julio Jones. I'd drive Julio Jones back to Gillette Stadium. I would do that trade in a heartbeat.
I mean, look, right? Let's consider this, right? Julio Jones is an undisputed first ballot Hall of Famer. He is absolutely fantastic. Of course, did not have a great season last year, but that Matt Ryan also didn't have a great season. I mean, there's only so much you can do in like when your quarterback's struggling. He clearly wants to leave the Falcons. Like, that is beyond doubt at this point. If he's not going to come here, he's going to go somewhere else. You know, I don't want Julio Jones going to the Dallas Cowboys, or I want him coming to the Patriots. And, you know, look, I was reading today actually about, you know, we have Kendrick Bourne, we have Nelson Aguilar, we have experienced guys coming in, but Julio Jones is undisputedly better than the sum of all the wide receivers we have at the Patriots, in my opinion. It is an absolute, like, if we, like, if the money is not a problem for us, I say there is no reason I would not sign him in this instant.
And I mean, Julio Jones, Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, and Jacoby Myers, and then you have Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry at tight end. That is a really, really good receiving corps for either Cam Newton or Mac Jones. So yeah, I would do this in a heartbeat. But anyway,
and also note that if he wants to play with Cam Newton, right? If there is a case in which Mac Jones becomes our starter, that's likely because he's either playing better than Cam Newton or at least on the same level. So I wouldn't really see that being a potential issue.
Yeah, I don't think that would be an issue. But yeah, anyways, any final thoughts, Ravi, Rohan, on the Patriots?
I think we got a good team coming up next year. So ain't broke, don't fix it. That's what I would go with.
Yeah, I'll start with one. I'll just end with one other quick thing. I mean, obviously, last week you guys weren't on, but we did a week-by-week preview of the Patriots season. Just predicted their season. I had them at 11-6, I believe. I just want to get your record predictions. Remember, 17-game season.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with 12-5.
Cool. Anirban, what's your prediction for next season?
If Julio Jones is here, I will say we'll go 15-2.
Wow. Okay.
He is the best wideout in the league.
Even now, you think so? Because like I feel Calvin Ridley kind of like passed him last year, like as the number one receiver in Atlanta.
15-2. At least you didn't say 18-1.
Okay, come on. All right, come on now.
All right, I'll say I'll do same as Anirban. If Julio Jones is here, 11-6. If Julio Jones is not here, 9-8.
Oh, okay. So even with Julio Jones, like that's basically barely being a playoff team then. Okay.
It's going to be a competitive division this year. So
I agree. Buffalo and Miami are both still pretty good. The Jets are still not going to be great this year. But I mean, yeah, I agree.
I say Pat squeak in as a wild card. They barely squeak in as a wild card. After
possible. That. And I mean, Tampa with the wild card last year, right? And they won the whole thing.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, we'll have a totally different team from last year, right? And last year, of course,
last year still winning 7 games. I mean, you have an improved
right. Like, so. I definitely think it's feasible to go from like 7 to much higher than that, considering that we're going to be having a completely different team with effectively different starting tight ends, different wide receivers, maybe a different quarterback. Like, I could definitely see us playing very well this season because as far as I'm concerned, there isn't necessarily going to be a huge correlation between the two seasons.
Your rent's probably going to pay for Julio Jones's flight to get to New England this next year.
He was on my fantasy team for 2 years.
Venmo him. We should basically all like Venmo him money, like split 4 ways, right?
I would definitely chip in.
And then we can also we need to chip in for the Uber ride he needs to take, or like his luxury car, whatever he's gonna rent, like the condominium in.
Or we could Venmo him extra and then raise some eyebrows with him and say, "Here, give us tickets."
Anyways, okay, but that's that's what we've discussed this week. Obviously, Bruins up tonight. Celtics, hopefully they can win one game at least. Celtics. Red Sox, hopefully you guys continue playing well, and hopefully the Patriots will. Obviously, it's still 4 months until the season starts, but it's getting closer. It'll be there soon. Every week flies by these days. But anyway, that's it for this week, guys. Thank you so much for coming on, and we will be back next week to cover another weekend in sports. Any final words, guys, before we end our show?
Let's go Bees.
Go Celtics.
I will order my Julio Jones jersey.
All right. Have a good one, guys. We'll be back next week.
Peace.
Thanks for